Thank you, Hiller. I found out here during lunch that because Hiller introduced me today, and Rotary has a rule that you can't introduce twice in a row, he doesn't get to introduce Coach Johnson next week. So I owe him big. I know that's a big deal to him. I also want to just reintroduce my brother Pete, who's here, my son Amos and his wife John, my husband Randy, and my niece Louise. I really appreciate all of you for coming. And it's comforting to see, I see so many familiar faces in here, so it makes this job a little bit easier. I'm looking forward to it. I was a member of the Sunrise Rotary Club for 20 years, from 1990 to 2010. And I really enjoyed the camaraderie, mingling with the people who are kind of the movers and shakers in the community, and hearing all the good talks that I heard, and I learned a lot about the community. I am in the process of becoming a member of this Rotary, so I'm looking forward to that as well. When I was in city court, what we handled was mostly civil cases and criminal misdemeanors. And you probably know that, but you probably don't know that domestic abuse, battery, and aggravated assault are misdemeanors, and they can be really quite serious. So I was noticing over the years that we saw so many domestic violence cases, and over time, they just increased and increased and increased. So around 2014, we as a group in city court decided maybe it'd be a good idea to have a specialized domestic violence court, like they have a specialized drug court or a specialized sobriety court. So a group of us, there were 15 trained professionals who were interdisciplinary, who we spent a year getting trained in the area of domestic violence. We spent that year also getting grants and just getting prepared to open this specialized court. I was the presiding judge, and we all did this in addition to our regular roles. But it was really the best thing I did in my career over there, because instead of just seeing these people at arraignment and then sentencing them and so on, we were able to spend quality time with them every single week. I saw every offender every week for a 2-year probationary period, and I got to talk to them one-on-one and see how they were growing, and it was a really, really good thing. So when I did retire in 2019, it was an honor to be asked to work with the new Capital Area Family Justice Center, because it is involved with domestic violence in our city, and it's in our area, in the whole capital area. So I'm delighted to be here and share this with you all. Next slide, please. Our board consists of, as if he didn't have enough to do already, Hiller Moore is our board president. He does a wonderful job. Your own Mary Erlingson is our board vice president. Jude Melville, who's president and CEO of the B First Bank, is our treasurer. John Price is the former executive director of the Irish Domestic Violence Center, and he's also an attorney. He's the secretary. Melanie Fields, who is here today, please raise your hand, Melanie. Melanie is a board member. She's an assistant district attorney, has been for many years, and is the only specialized domestic violence prosecutor in the district attorney's office. She's the busiest lady in town, and she's probably the most knowledgeable in town about the whole field of domestic violence. Rhoda Reddix and Valerie Schluter, who are not here today, they both work for Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady University, which is Our Lady of the Lake Teaching Hospital. And we try to do a lot with the medical interface, just in order to get medical professionals to learn all the dynamics of domestic violence, so we can all work together in the system. Patty Freeman is the executive director of IRIS Domestic Violence Center, which is our shelter in town. Patty was a long-term board member of IRIS and a retired sheriff's deputy. Really wonderful person to have on our board. Sabrina Pierre is a civic leader and a volunteer. She's our liaison with the churches, and she has the distinction of also being a survivor of domestic violence, so she gives a lot of perspective to the board. And then Suzanne Hamilton, who is here. Suzanne is my tech guru over here. She is our executive director, and she's done a fabulous job. She just started about a year ago She used to work with Melanie as a victim advocate in the DA's office, and we're really proud to have her on board. Okay, prevalence. There's some pretty shocking statistics in this field. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience domestic violence in their lifetimes. That means 25% of the women in this room, theoretically have experienced or will experience domestic violence. It is an equal opportunity problem. It's not limited to one demographic, to people who are educated or not educated, to people who are this race or that race. It is across the board. I am going to, in my talk, refer to the victims as women, because most of them are, and most of the serious injuries and deaths are among women. But I will acknowledge that definitely there are men who are victims of domestic violence as well. Domestic violence accounts for over 15% of all violent crimes in this country. In 2021, East Baton Rouge Parish had 36 domestic violence-related deaths. That is off the charts. Now, we recognize that there was the COVID effect. You get people, abuser and victim, together stuck in a house for 2 years, and all the frustrations that go with the pandemic, and it was a big factor in that huge number. Last year, we had 24 domestic violence-related deaths, which seems like it's a lot better, but it's also off the chart. We are way out of line with the rest of the country when it comes to domestic violence deaths. We rank 5th in the nation for the number of women murdered by men, and our state's rate of women murdered by men remains 85% higher than the national average. So we definitely have some work to do in this state. Since 2009, we've consistently ranked in the top 10 most dangerous states for women. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about the Capital Area Family Justice Center. What is a Family Justice Center? It is a centralized location where all of the services that a victim needs and her children are located under one roof. That's really, really important. It's a delivery system that makes it easier for these victims who are already under tremendous stress and duress to get the case that they need. The movement began in 2002 in San Diego. A man named Casey Gwynn and a woman named Gail Strack, who were lawyers in San Diego, saw the problems that we were all having and started the first domestic violence center there. We were lucky to have them come to Baton Rouge last March and spend 3 days with us, 2 days doing strategic planning to how to get our center off the ground, and 1 day in strangulation training. Strangulation is the #1 predictor of a potential death from domestic violence. So people in the medical community and people in the nonprofit community, everyone needs to understand the dynamics of strangulation, and they really did a good job with that. We started our center in January of 2020. Well, we all know what happened in March of 2020. So everything kind of came to a screeching halt for a while, but now we are up and running and really becoming the dynamic center that we need to be. Next slide, please. Outcomes of family justice centers. Following a domestic violence incident, the victim is in a state of trauma, you can imagine. Her abuser is almost always motivated by power and control. So it's a very likely possibility that she has no access to money, she has no access to transportation, and she has probably small children in the home. So what does she do? She has to kind of venture out to get the help that she needs, and while she's in a state of trauma. So it's very difficult. If you look down on that slide, without a family justice center, what she might do is find her way somehow to the police, maybe with children in tow. And she's got to sit there and make a long police report. The children are there. What do you do with them? The police take all the information. They say, well, you need to go to the hospital and get checked out. So she's got to get herself to the hospital or to some medical facility. Again, give her full report, get the help that she might need there, and they say, yeah, but you're going to need a lawyer. So she's got to go find Southeast Legal Services get legal help, or if she can afford it, which she usually cannot, find a private lawyer who, again, is going to take all the information, tell her she needs to get a protective order, she needs to file for divorce, she needs to get child custody, she needs to get housing, and so on. It's stressful. And then they say, well, you also need child protective services, so go to this agency over here. So you get the idea. What happens very, very often is she goes, forget it. It's too much trouble. I'm overwhelmed by all this. I don't have the money to do this or that. I don't have the transportation to get there and back. So she goes back to her abuser until the next time, and then the next time, and then the next time. With the Family Justice Center, that other one on the top, all of these necessary services are provided under one roof. You've got medical, you've got police, you've got housing, you've got child protection services, and you've got legal. All of those are represented within our campus under roof, and while she's giving her report once, giving her whole background one time to the intake coordinator, her children are in a safe place, playing, being safe, having fun, and being protected. So it makes sense, don't you think? The next slide will show the people who are our service partners, who are all under our one roof. We have the Sheriff's Office, representatives from them, from the District Attorney's Office, from City Police, Baton Rouge Children's Advocacy Center, Iris Domestic Violence Center, we have Southeast Legal Services, we have Department of Children and Family Services, and we have Discovery Renew, which is a domestic violence program, all right there at the center. Where are we? On the next slide, you'll see we are located at 1120 Government Street, Building C. You all may recognize this as the old Louisiana School for the Visually Impaired on Government. It's a big campus, old-fashioned, big buildings, and most of them are occupied by other service providers that are really compatible with what we do. But we're in a big building in the front. It's right off the interstate. It is very centrally located. It's close to the courthouse, and it's on the bus route. So we think it's a good place to be located. We actually serve an 8-parish area: East and West Baton Rouge, East and West Feliciana, Livingston, Ascension, Iberville, and Point Capee. Now, we're in the early days, and so most of our traffic now is East Baton Rouge Parish. But we are geared up and ready to accept people from all 8 parishes, and looking forward to doing that. You're welcome to come by sometime. Call Suzanne, who's our executive director, and she'd be happy to give you a tour. I think you'd be very impressed. We've made it into a very welcoming place to be. Next slide, please. So the things that we do, I've covered a lot of this. We do safety planning, meeting with trained law enforcement, connecting with mental health and counseling services, referral to educational programs. I like this because a lot of these people have never had an opportunity to learn how to budget. What do you do once I get out of my house and my abuser, and I don't have job skills, and I've never had a job, and I've never had a budget? How do I do that? So we can get them set up with that, and credit repair. We also have people who are able to help them with English as a second language. So, I mean, when I say one-stop shop, that is our goal, and that's where we're really working toward. We have emergency shelter, housing, and other support services, and we have legal services there. We have somebody from Southeast Legal Services in-house who can help them with all of those things they need: the protective order, the divorce, the custody, and the visitation. Now, of course, they may be having to go to court every now and then, but we can help them with all of that. It's just, it makes it much more likely that they're going to see the thing through and get out of a really bad situation. One thing I would like to point out, too, is domestic violence is learned behavior. Children who grow up seeing their parents abuse one another grow up thinking this is normal behavior. And so they abuse as they grow up to become victims or abusers themselves, more likely than not. So one of our goals is to break the chain. have the kids get out of that situation so that they're not witnessing that, because chances are they will be perpetrators or victims down the road if we don't do that. In fact, in domestic violence court, since I was able to see these offenders every single week and talk to them one-on-one about, what did you learn in your class this week? What did you learn in your session with your other offenders? The thing I heard most often was, I learned that when I get mad at somebody, I don't have to hit them. You know, most of us, that's so foreign to our experience, but this is something that's definitely where they're coming from. The next slide just shows us at work. The first one shows the members from the DA's office, the sheriff's office, and probation and parole working together on a particular case, talking about best strategies for this particular victim. And then the other one shows Baton Rouge Police Department, Irish Domestic Violence Center, and Southeast Legal Services. Again, collaborating. We're all about collaboration and working together to make a better life for these people and their children. All of you are involved in the community. You're medical, legal, educational, nonprofit, business, industry, all of the important things about a community. So I want to just mention quickly the economic impact. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, victims of domestic violence lose nearly 8 million days of work per year in this country. And that is equivalent to 32,000 full-time jobs. So it affects us all. It affects us all of our work. And it not only endangers their health and safety, it also endangers their productivity. So just on an economic level, we also need to pay attention to this. So that's what we are. That's what we do. We're planning our first major fundraiser in the fall. Hope you all will attend. We would love to have an individual or a family or an organizational sponsor. So if anybody has the heart for this kind of work, please talk to Hiller or me or Suzanne. We would hope you will be able to attend our fundraiser too, and we'll give you more information about that later. In closing, what do you do about it? I mean, it's very awkward. If you find out that somebody at your table is a victim of domestic violence, or somebody that's in your workplace is a victim of domestic violence, it's very awkward to know what to do about that. You don't want to get that involved. There's a little bit of a risk factor, and so on and so on. Well, there are things that you can do. One, you will see on your table the little swag that we left you. There's a Family Justice Center brochure and a little card. What I'm going to ask you to do, if you will, is please take this, put the card in your wallet or in your glove compartment, same with the little brochure, and it has all of our information here. You learn about someone you know who's a victim of domestic violence. In whatever subtle way you want to do it, you can slip this to them and tell them there's help, and it's centralized, and it's not going to be this huge hassle that you've been hearing about all this time. Or if you don't have access to this, I'm hoping to be one of your members soon, and you can remember, oh, there's Laura in Rotary. I always have this stuff in my car. So ask me and I can give it to you. Or you can just let me have whatever information you have, and we can try to do whatever we can in order to help. I think we're going places. I think that it's going to be a really good asset for our city and our community and for our region. And by making just the smallest gesture, you can do so much to change somebody's family tree for generations to come. So thank you so much, and I'll entertain any questions if we have time. Yes.
Where do you get your funding from?
Right now, and I'm going to defer sometimes to the people who know more about this than me, that would be Suzanne and Melanie, but right now we have LCLE is giving us a lot of our funding, the United Way, all of these, you know how grants work. The idea is to get the grant and then wean off of it and become self-supporting. So we do have grants lasting to the end of this fiscal year. We're working on some others. Anything additional, Melanie or Suzanne? Okay, yes.
Hold up, wait for the mic so they can hear your question. He doesn't listen to you.
Yeah, I'm listening to him. No. I grew up with, a pleasure of growing up with Amos and the Prosser family, so it's a pleasure hearing you speak.
Good to
Thank
see you, Stephen.
Yes, definitely. Same here. So the incidence is so high, we've talked about that here in Louisiana, and obviously it impacts all areas of our community, but is there data out there for you to be able to kind of target certain areas where that incidence is out the roof, and are there resources for us to focus in areas where there's a high prevalence of the issue?
Melanie, help me.
So as the judge said, it crosses all socioeconomics, races, and businesses in our society. But for resources, it's really to focus on the more poor areas of town. The resources need to be in that area because of transportation issues. If there are any lawyers, I'm going to do a plug because we do have wealthy victims. And if the abuser controls all the money, they need lawyers too. They need help too. And so if you've got volunteer hours, we'll take them for that. But that answers your question.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
To what do you attribute the unusually high percentage of this problem in the state of Louisiana?
While I said that it is a equal opportunity problem that we have across all cultures, across all socioeconomic backgrounds, it is in large part related to socioeconomic status, lack of education, lack of opportunity. And, you know, you look at any list there is out there, Louisiana's not going to be at the top of them. So we have a lot of that, a lot of problems we need to address, and this is one big one. Yes?
Because there's a national housing crisis, and because I know that there's, because there are 2,000 people already on the waiting list for public housing, do you refer the women or the men, the abused person, to emergency housing, or do you have transitional housing that's longer term to the degree that you need it?
Are you familiar with the Irish Domestic Violence Shelter?
I am.
Okay, and it houses a good number of people. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to go. They don't want to be in that kind of housing. And we do, you're right, we do have limited transitional housing in this town, but sometimes that's the only option. So it's going to be a little friction about where am I going to be, but we do have options for people, and hopefully we'll get more. Yes, ma'am.
YWCA is building housing for domestic violence. It's just in the beginning stages.
Great.
They are going to add to that, just for you to know.
Great. Well, be in touch. We need to know all this. Yes.
Of the victims who come into your agency,
Mhm.
how many successfully follow through, or how many go back to their abuser?
Okay, that's a question. She's asking, of the victims who do appear in our center, how many are successfully reintegrated into society without their abuser, how many go back? We don't have enough numbers yet, but what we do know is that people who have access to a family justice center where everything is centralized, the numbers, and this is across the country, the numbers of people who go back to their abusers are much reduced. That's one of the main reasons to do that. Yes?
Are there any programs for the abuser themselves? Because they seem to be repeat the process.
Yeah.
So you're addressing one side of the issue and besides.
Yeah, that's what I was doing in court. My program, my specialized domestic violence court, was really offender-centered because we put them on probation for 2 years and made them go through this very rigorous process, and they had to have a job, and they had to go to class every week, and they had to be drug screened and alcohol screened, and they had to, you know, have no more criminal conduct. So there are things like that. The major focus is on victims and children right now, and there's a reason for that as well. Yes?
Do they still have that going on in the city court? And what are the penalties for domestic violence?
They don't have the specialized court going on anymore, and I regret to say that. Hopefully it'll get started again. We did have a judge who was very willing to take it on. I just didn't work out, but I'm hoping they're going to get that back again. The penalties for misdemeanors, which everything we handled were, the maximum penalty for any offense is a year. Most cases it's 6 months. So you could have a serious domestic violence case and just get jail for 6 months to a year. Or you can be put on probation and have to jump through a bunch of hoops. Yes?
Well, first, thank you, Lauren, for sharing this information and shining a light on this real difficult topic, because a lot of people know someone who's either been through it, going through it, but it's hard to talk about.
It is, you're right.
It's one of those things that there's a lot of shame attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, thank you for the concept of congregating the resources in one site. That is so important, and we're finding that to be true in other areas as well, not just domestic violence, but victims need to know that, if you try to navigate all of the resources that are available, it's hard.
It's terrible.
It is just daunting. So having that kind of approach is what we at United Way really love, and we love supporting that. My challenge is for everyone in this room, now that you know what's going on, now that you know what's being done about it, please find a place to get in and support this work. Support the organizations that are providing these services and the concepts that are evidence-based and proven to being effective in addressing it. So,
Thank you for that affirmation. Yes?
He's been raising his hand.
Oh, I had a quick question.
I'm so sorry.
Everybody's always, so this is for you.
Oh. Y'all get this to the kids, especially to the school system that see abuse at home, especially the chronic abuse? Do they have a way to get to y'all?
Suzanne?
Yep, so we are also partnered with the Children's Advocacy Center that does a lot of work with children who have been exposed to violence. And so that's one of the goals of the Family Justice Center, not to just address the mom who's going through the abuse, but to also address that generational violence that's happening and that they're being exposed to. So that's how we're going to, move the ticker back in the other direction and impact those horrific numbers that we saw earlier in this presentation.
And the Children Advocacy Center is one of our named partners. They're on site.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
One more.
Okay, one more, and I told her.
But you mentioned DCFS earlier, and they've obviously been in the news recently, and Marquita
Oh, yeah.
had to resign or whatever. Can you comment on their resources and what kind of job you thought they were doing and where their issues might be a little bit?
They have one of the hardest jobs in the world, and they're incredibly understaffed, underpaid. People aren't going into that line of work anymore because they know that. I think what we need to do is just provide governmental resources for those kind of things so that they don't happen so much. Same with, people aren't going into the medical professions. People aren't going into education anymore because it's just too hard. So I think that we all need to get behind funding things to encourage people to do the work that needs to be done out there. Thank you all very much.